Hey, what's up? John Sonmez here from SimpleProgrammer.com. So I got a couple of questions from someone who got fired from their job. And I wanted to read this email. It's a little bit long, but I think it'll be worth it because there's a few lessons in here that I think can help you from surprisingly getting fired from your job. Because it really sucks when life blindsides you, especially when you think things are going well and then all of a sudden you find out they're not. I mean, this happens in jobs, it happens in relationships a lot, and there's ways to prevent this. So if you don't want to get blindsided in life, you might want to listen to what I've got to say here. So I'm going to read you this email. And this is from Luke. I'm not going to give his last name so we can keep it anonymous. There's a lot of Lukes in the world. He says, "Hi, John. It goes without saying, but please don't reveal my name. Today, I just found out that I've been fired from my new job where I've been working for the past 3 weeks. I was working as a contractor through an intermediary consultancy company. I was being trained to do the job from scratch, and everything seemed to be going great. Then this week, Wednesday, my supervisor calls me into the office and asks why I hadn't filed some documents in a folder. The truth is, with all the new things that I'd been learning to do, I'd simply forgotten to do it. Anyway, I filed all those documents and changed the way I worked so that could never happen again." Okay, that's good. "The next day, my supervisor called me into the office again for a serious meeting about why I hadn't created a drop-down field in an Excel sheet. I told my supervisor that because we needed to discuss a document with another member of the staff, I had assumed that we would come back to finish the document at a later date. My supervisor then questioned what I had actually been doing all day, as in his or her mind I hadn't been given much work to do that day. The thing is, I know for a fact that I was busting my balls all day. So, fast forward to Friday, end of day, I get called to the company headquarters, which is a 10-minute walk away from my office. My business relationship manager looks at me with a confused look and starts to tell me that my supervisor had complained about me to the head of the department. Well, and that as a result, my contract had been terminated. That is, don't turn up on Monday. I couldn't believe it when he told me what my supervisor had said about me. He or she complained that I had been late 3 times over the 3-week period, and even revealed personal information that I had divulged, that I had personal struggles with my sleep routine, pinning that as a cause for my lateness. The truth is that I had to move to a new location for this job and was relying on taxis, which were sometimes unreliable, to get me to work in the first couple of weeks. During my third and final week, I had sorted out transport and had been 5 to 10 minutes early every day. Furthermore, I apparently was not following processes properly, was sending out incorrect emails, and my supervisor had stated that he or she could no longer do their own job anymore because of all the mistakes I was making. It appears to me that my supervisor deliberately and perhaps even oh gosh. Why can't I say this word? Whatever. Planned to get me fired. You have a mental. You know when you have a mental block when you just can't say a word? For some reason, I can't say the word. All right. I have a lease on an apartment which I'm contracted to until the end of August, with presumably no job to go in this location. That really sucks. I'm interested as to what your perspective is on all this, what I could have done better, and what can I do now to make the best of the situation. So, okay. So there's a few things here, right? First of all, do I think that this person was probably gunning for you? Yes, I think so. That happens, okay? Sometimes, for whatever reason, someone just doesn't like you and they start gunning for you and they want you gone. And when you're in that situation, there's not a whole lot that you can do. I mean, if they're really, really gunning for you, because, eventually they're gonna get rid of you if they want to. But I'll give you some tips that could help prevent that, and just some things in general to think about here. So the first thing is, if we talk about what happened when you make a mistake, first of all, if you screw up, the proper thing is never to offer an excuse. It's always just to accept it and to say that you'll do better, or what you learned from that mistake. So in the case of misfiling some documents or not making an Excel drop down, you just own it, right? I know this is really hard to do because it's real tempting to give some kind of an excuse or explanation for your action, but regardless of what kind of excuse or explanation that you give, it's always going to sound like an excuse. And it's really, really hard to do this, just to accept this, just to say, you're right. I screwed up there. It was my fault. I misunderstood what needed to happen here. But I want to make sure that I have it clear now so that this doesn't happen again. that's the proper response. Anything else, if you explain away something, and so I think what's probably happened in this case is that you've explained, again, pretty valid excuses. I mean, if there is such a thing, but excuses are excuses, right? So in multiple cases, if you've been called out on something and then you've had an excuse, you conveniently have an excuse for everything. And I mean, most people do, then it's going to seem like you're a person who makes excuses, right? So if you're late for work and you say, well, I have a sleep problem or I had trouble with taxis, saying that it may be valid, but it's still your responsibility to get there on time, right? Ultimately, regardless of what the circumstances are, it's still your responsibility. And someone doesn't know whether or not when you're making an excuse, whether it's a truthful excuse or it's not truthful. You could just be making something up. Because if you tell someone they did something wrong, ultimately they're always going to have some reason for it. And humans have reasons for it, but no one knows if they're making it up or not. So just having an excuse doesn't give you any benefit or at all. It's better to just say, I've got I had some issues, and I totally recognize that I'm late, and it's totally my fault. And I will make sure that I will correct whatever is going on and make sure that this doesn't happen again. And you're sparing them the details, right? Same thing with the problem with the document, same thing with the Excel spreadsheet. Very, very difficult to do this, and it seems wrong. It seems like you should offer up an excuse. Now, if they ask you, if they say, well, can you give me some more details? Can you tell me what caused you to think this way, or why you were late, then you can say, this is not an excuse, but I'll just tell you what's happened, and you can explain there. But aside from them directly querying and asking you for the detailed explanation, don't give it, and don't give an excuse. I know this is very, very difficult to do, and I even find myself doing this from time to time. I have to be very careful when I answer an email or answer someone, and I've failed in some way, and make sure that it's so tempting to offer that excuse. So that's number one, is just how to deal with and handle that. Okay, the second thing I'll say is that if you should always be sending weekly reports. I think I did a video on this, on the idea of sending weekly reports. If not, I know that I have it in my book here, probably in both books. So The Complete Software Developer's Career Guide. If you haven't read this, read this book. It has a lot of information about that, and also Soft Skills, the Software Developer's Manual. I talk about how I send weekly reports in there as well. So I'd recommend that you check those out. Again, am I plugging my book? Yes, I'm plugging my book, because I put all of my best career advice in, especially in the Complete Software Developer's Career Guide, okay? And there's a career section in Soft Skills as well. But here's the thing. You should be documenting everything that you're doing every day, especially, now in this case, it could be a real misunderstanding, a real miscommunication problem, and the supervisor may have a lot of stuff going on, may be stressed out, and may feel like you're not performing to the expectations of what this person has, right? And so it just might be lack of knowledge. And you can cure up a lot of misconceptions just by self-reporting information, right? And I talk about this again in the Complete Software Developer's Career Guide. I talk about how to look good in front of your boss, and how to basically get along with your boss. And one of the most important things is to make your boss look good, and to help them to do their job, make their job easier. And one of the big things that a supervisor does, probably the main thing that a supervisor does, is that person is going to report information higher up. So they have to gather information and report that, and they have to make sure that that people are being efficient on the team. And so if you're volunteering that information from the beginning, right? If every day you're sending a report, when you first start a job, it's maybe even be a good idea to send a daily report and say, I just wanted to let you know exactly how I'm spending my time. And there's a real good way to do this. I mean, there's multiple ways, but here's one in this particular case, especially when you're a contractor, is to say, look, is just send your first email and say, for the first week or so while I'm here, I'd love to send you a daily report of what I'm doing, so you know exactly what I'm working on every hour of the day. And you can say basically, look, I know you're paying me to do a job, and I want you to make sure that you know where your money's being spent and where I'm spending my time. And if I'm spending my time in the wrong place, I want you to be able to tell me, so that I can do the best job. I really want to do the best job that I possibly can for you and give you the most value for the money that you're paying me, right? And so you say, I'm going to send weekly reports, or I'm going to send daily reports, or I can send a weekly report that summarizes everything I've done every single day, and make it really detailed at first, right? Eventually, you can sort of relax this a little bit and just send a weekly report where you just put some highlights for every day and generally what you worked on every day. And I highly recommend this no matter where you are in your career. It's just a good idea. It's just something that as a supervisor, right, having been in that position, getting weekly reports and being able to see what someone's doing and what they're working on, it eliminates that confusion of, you might have an impression that someone's not doing their job, but when you see what they're working on, especially when they spell out anything that they're struggling on or where they're spending a lot of time, it allows you to know that they are working, right? So you can be alleviated of that feeling, and then it also allows you to redirect them if you need to, right? And then the other thing that you should be doing is you should be checking in to say with your boss. So we'll go to the next thing here, which is that you should be checking in with your boss or supervisor, especially when you first start a job, to say, hey, and you can do this in the weekly reports or daily reports as well, but you should at least stop by and say, hey, look, I just want to make sure that you're happy with what I'm doing, right? Because I'm here to do a good job. I'm very conscientious of my work, right? I want to be one of your top performers. That's something that I strive for in life. I have a very high sense of integrity and doing the job that I'm paid for and going above and beyond whenever possible. So I just want to make sure if there's anything that I'm not doing correctly, I'm new here, but if you can tell me, I would gladly fix it or change it, because I want to make sure that I'm doing that, right? So there's lots of ways to have a conversation when you first start. Now, that doesn't mean you do this all the time and you bug your boss over it, but you should always know when something is weird, right? So I could say the same thing with relationships, right? If you feel like something's off, right? And so if you're in a relationship with someone, for you guys, if you're in a relationship with a girl and you feel like she's like there's something off, you should always call that out or address it, right? This is just a good way to handle people in general, right? Is when you suspect something, you have to alleviate someone's concern, right? So I've often, given some coaching advice to guys when they're approaching girls, and it's like, if you feel like what you just did was creepy, say, you know what, that might have seemed a little bit creepy, but you know what I mean? Like, I know it's called calling out the obvious, right? If you feel like you said something that would make someone feel a certain way, or you're picking up this vibe, call out the obvious, right? So, when you're talking to someone, when you're doing negotiation, there's a really good book that actually talks about this. It's called, not Never Eat Alone. What is it? It's Never Split the Difference. I've recommended this book. You can check out my review on this book. But in that, he talks about hostage negotiations, right? And he talks about how one of the best techniques for doing hostage negotiation is to talk to the kidnapper or terrorist or whatever it is, the perpetrator, and to basically say, I recognize, like, to repeat back what they're feeling, what they're probably you're probably scared right now. I understand that, you know what I mean? So to repeat that back, to state the obvious, that builds rapport, okay? So this is something that you should definitely employ, okay? So aside from that, I want to look through your email real quick to see if I had any other advice, but I think that's the main thing that I would say here is that if you do those things, that's going to prevent you from running into these problems in the future. So yeah. Well, I'll one more thing. Okay, I'll say one more thing. As far as the lateness, with taxis and whatnot, that's totally your responsibility, right? Okay, it's excusable to not understand for one time that taxis are going to be late or that your logistics are messed up, but even then, like, you should prepare ahead of time to make sure that you're going to be super early, especially if this is a new job, right? And especially if you're getting some vibes or some bad stuff happening with your supervisor. There's always a way. I did this video on never being late. I think I called it something like that. And I talked about how 5 to 10 minutes early is on time, right? And that you should actually strive to be there 30 minutes early and maybe spend 20 minutes in your car or, reading a book or answering some emails or doing something else with your time, just to make sure that you're on time for things, especially when they're really important. So if you know that taxis may cause you to run as much as 30 minutes late, then you should probably be leaving an hour early, right? So that you're going to plan on being there 30 minutes early, and so that if you are late, you'll still be 10 minutes early when you're late. So there's really no excuse, honestly. I don't mean to be a jerk, but there's no excuse for it happening more than once. If it happens once, even that shouldn't really happen, but for it to happen 3 times, that's going to be a problem. Okay. Again, I think it's kind of silly, right? For most jobs, like, who cares if someone is a little bit late, especially a software development job? Most work environments are pretty lax for that, but not all. And so you've got to make sure, especially when you're making a first impression, first impressions are really, really important. So try to build rapport. Try to know, like, you have to sense some kind of tension with someone who's your supervisor, and you've got to figure out how to patch that up, right? And how to build rapport with that person. That's going to help you a lot. And then, as far as like what you should do from here, just start pounding the pavement, start hustling and trying to get another job here. You may be able to get out of your lease, right? I think that a lot of times, so, being a landlord myself, I can tell you that if you just lost your job, if you call the owner, right, depending on who owns this property, one thing I would say is, if you call them and you say, hey, I just lost my job, so I'm not going to be able to pay rent, so can I get out of the lease? That's probably a pretty good now, some people are going to say no, and I've said no in certain cases, but you have to realize that if you think about their perspective, if you don't have a job and you can't pay the lease, you're going to get months behind, and they're going to lose a lot more money. They'd rather just probably cut their losses and have you, break the lease and maybe not charge you a lease breaking fee, or maybe you can negotiate that and then they can rent it out to someone else, rather than have you end up being, several months behind and then they have to kick you out. So that's what I'd recommend, is to try and negotiate on that part as well. But yeah, so there you go. This hopefully this is helpful to you. Again, some of these things, it's not obvious, it's not common sense, and I don't expect, you shouldn't feel bad about this as if you should know all this stuff, but you do now, right? So this is a learning experience in life. Just chalk it up as a learning experience, and that when you get a new job and you're starting out in a new job, to do some of the things I said, right? To make sure that you do weekly reports, to build rapport with your supervisor, to check in with them to make sure you're doing a good job. That's going to prevent a lot of this. I mean, at the end of the day, some people are racist, some people discriminate, sometimes there's prejudice, some people just don't like you, and some of this stuff probably may not even help, but, well, it may not solve the problem, but it should help, because it's going to be really hard to fire someone who is documenting everything that they're doing every single day and is checking in, right? You're going to kind of like this person, like, even if you don't want to, right? And even if you don't like them, it's going to be really hard to fire someone who's done their due diligence, who has documentation of conversation. Be that person who documents things, especially when you're in any kind of a nasty environment, or you think that something might go south. I've used documentation before to prevent myself from getting in trouble, and actually someone who tried to accuse me of not working, and I had so much documentation. I've also used it to help myself get a raise. So, all right, that's all I got for you today. Make sure you click that subscribe button below and click the bell so you don't miss any videos. I'll talk to you next time. Take care.